has adding those things into your day led to overall improvement in you or the community? And then just use that as your basis for going forward.
Mike, thanks for coming on the podcast, mate. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Alex, it's a thrill to be here with you after you came on Humans of Purpose the other day, and I'm sorry I wasn't prepared and in my sauna for this conversation.
That's all right. I'm just going to have to turn the temp up and sweat it out for both of us on this one.
Absolutely.
So to get things kicked off, mate, what is the sweatiest you've ever been?
I thought long and hard about this, and every day I have an extremely long and sweaty sauna using one of your saunas, so I could have easily defaulted to that as my answer on any given weekday at about 4:30 p.m. But I'll take you back about a decade ago, a decade plus, when I went hiking in the Andes with my good friend. We were ascending the Inca Trail. And for me, that was an extremely sweaty experience. It was very cold. There was not much oxygen in the air. And that Inca Trail, which lasts about 5 days if anyone's done it, is grueling. And you're wearing really thick rainproof clothes, but you're sweating constantly. And what I remember about that trip was that you're sweating so much that you can eat and drink whatever you want. So you could just smash chocolate bars and Gatorades and really have a great time, and you'll still lose 5 kilos. So that was the sweatiest I've ever been.
Was that also the most uncomfortable you've ever been?
Generally, yes, but losing the 5 kilos was very important at the time when I was a bit tubbier. So I was very happy with the outcome. And when you're sweating that much, as you'll know from your sauna experiences, you do tend to have great spiritual and philosophical conversations. So that was a highlight.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast in sauna, because sometimes you just have these conversations where it's like, I wouldn't have had that conversation if we were just going for a walk, you know?
And it's such a novel idea because I've heard something like that. Gabby Reese doing something similar in her barrel sauna in the US. And I just thought, what a fantastic idea. And if you really want to get truth, if you want to connect over collective shared human truths, get people to sweat under really severe conditions really close to each other. It's genius.
Yeah, that's nice. I know from trying this myself though, because I used to think, if I just, sometimes I have these great conversations in sauna. If I just like get some microphones in there, that'd make for a great podcast. But actually what it would make for is a lot of like saying something really profound and then like a pause and then the other person like, man, it's like really hot in here. Yeah. And then there'd be like 30 seconds of silence and then just like some heavy breathing and then someone else would say something else really profound. So actually wouldn't make for the best conversation or podcast.
I've only had the chance to have one sauna with another person before COVID hit, and it was the same bloke who I did the Inca Trail with, and I tried to sort of get him in that mode of maybe having some more of our deep and meaningful conversations. He just couldn't go with me. It lasted about 30 seconds and then we were back to, wow, it's way too hot in here.
Yeah, exactly. And like pulling out your phone or something and getting distracted.
Exactly.
And so were you doing the Inca Trail for any particular reason, or it was just something you wanted to do?
Oh, I just call it a mid to late 20s sort of bucket list kind of thing to do. So we did the Inca Trail, we did Bolivia, we did Argentina, and that was a pretty terrific trip actually, just sort of to open the mindset a bit and really explore a different part of the world.
And we've been feasted on by mosquitoes during that Inca Trail.
Yeah, pretty horribly. I didn't get altitude sickness was the main thing that I was really happy to avoid. And my good friend did, and that set him back a few days in the trip and ended up horribly in a Bolivian hospital. But that's a tale he can tell on another podcast. But for sure, it was an incredible trip, and was lucky not to get sick. And if anything, got a bit fitter because there was so little oxygen in the atmosphere.
Yeah, interesting. And so, we'll talk a little bit later about your kind of day-to-day rituals, because you're doing some pretty cool stuff, and looking after yourself is obviously a very big focus of yours. Is doing things like Inca Trail something that you still kind of seek, like that sort of, there's a mindset required for that sort of experience, right? Because you kind of got to push through some stuff. Yeah, challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. I think challenge is very important in travel. And obviously, travel has changed a lot because of COVID. But we were lucky that one of the last trips I did before coming back was going to Chile with my wife. And we managed to spend some time doing the Patagonia. And Patagonia was just absolutely incredible, and doing some of the trail hikes there, and ascending some of the peaks and mountains. And some of the challenges there was so hard that I couldn't do them because of my back. The elevation was so steep. But certainly just getting to places that are pristine in nature and very clean and untouched, certainly a goal through travel. And I think over the past few years, I've certainly found myself wanting to connect with nature more and more. So any opportunity to find nature and be in an active way is very important for myself and my well-being.
Yeah, I love that. I think it drives sanity too as well, right? Like, you know, I'm sitting in an infrared sauna and I've been indoors for the last, 3 weeks, really, barely been outside, and especially through COVID and everything. And you end up just being disconnected from Earth, and then you feel this disconnection from yourself. So I think it's so important to get out and do those sort of things. How steep was it when you were in Chile that you couldn't continue? It must have been like vertical.
It was basically vertical, but at the time I didn't know, but I had a prolapsed L5-S1 disc. So I've since had surgery to repair that, but I think that was part of my problem as well. So it might not have been as hard as I'm describing, but some of the harder treks in Patagonia, really you've got to be light on your feet, nimble, and you've got to have good resilience, I'd say, and persistence, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. To kind of keep going when you're not feeling like you want to keep going.
That's right. And I think that's very important in life as a general principle, to sort of think about what do you feel is your natural limit and how can you extend way beyond that in everyday practices to make you understand that the limit isn't really ever the limit. It's just a sort of a figment of the imagination.
Yeah, I learned that really simply a couple of years ago, actually, when I started using a PT. And I'd walk in and he'd have these workouts on the wall, and I'm like, Max, there's no way in hell that I'm doing that. Like, I actually just, like, I can't do all that work. Like, but sure enough, he made it happen.
So Max pushed you through.
Yeah, he did. He pushed me to my max.
That's why it's called Max. That's actually just a clever nickname.
That's it. So. Yeah, I mean, I think knowing those limits and pushing through them is kind of critical. And it seems to me, reading and learning a bit about sort of where you've taken yourself over the last few years, now having a very successful podcast, Humans of Purpose, which I was lucky enough to be on the other day. I can't remember exactly who you were working for, but then you left and you started running Purposeful.
The HHS and the Victorian government, yep.
Yep, and you now run Humans of Purpose and the podcast, and purpose and people's purpose seems to be a focus of yours. Why do you think purpose is so important in people's lives?
Yeah, so purpose for me became very important for the simple reason that I felt that I'd lost it or didn't have it many years ago when I was a bit disenchanted in the public service and trying to figure out what is my way as a sort of, late 20s, early 30s, trying to figure out where am I heading. I'd always worked in health and social policy, and I'd always known that I want to work with disadvantaged people and help them, sort of be their best in society through whatever means I could. But I felt as though I was very lost, and my wife and I headed overseas to New York for a holiday. And on that trip, I just got very interested in the idea of personal and professional purpose and what it could mean for a person to sort of embrace those ideas. And so during that trip, I thought, there must be a lot of people who are pretty lost career-wise and sort of struggling to get that meaningfulness out of work, and also really, not connecting with a true sustaining or something to uplift them through the monotony of the everyday. So I thought the best way to sort of contribute to a better world would be to connect with people who are really having a positive social impact in society through their work. And that became the podcast form that was Humans of Purpose in about 2017. And it's given me the chance to meet and, release a podcast every week with just some incredible leaders in the social world here who just don't get the accolades or respect or attention they deserve. These are people who are slaving away at not-for-profits, public sector, journalism, media, doing everything they can to help those who have maybe not been dealt the best hand in life. And I just love the chance to connect with them and be uplifted and to share their purpose and their story around that. And with the idea that maybe other people could draw some lessons from that and maybe learn a bit about what it would be like or how to construct their own sort of purpose or parameters for a better life. So that was sort of more or less the podcast. And at the same time, I started a consulting business called Purposeful, and that was a bit more around sort of business and not-for-profit goals and making sure that they had a social impact that was measurable and could be reported on quite well. And, the idea being that companies and not-for-profits who do good and then can measure and tell the story of that good in a really evidence-based way are going to do better because they can prove their impact.
I really like. Yeah. No, that's great. So, how does a company actually measure their social impact, or how does a person measure their social impact?
So, probably you look at a company level or a not-for-profit level, and you look at the activities that the organisation is doing, and what are the set of activities that organisation commits to that are sort of for a social purpose or social good. A lot of companies will have foundations or charity arms that they donate through. They might engage in impact investing. They might have certain environmental programs. They might have different grassroots sports or recreational programs that they sponsor. So helping organisations like that to really just tell the story around how that all makes sense and how what they're doing contributes to impact. And you get to sort of some interesting places in that work where a lot of the times it's not doing much or it's not contributing to a great social impact, and you're trying to help them instead tinker with the strategy around how to be more impactful. So that's what I really enjoyed, that sort of intersection between strategy and social impact.
And is there actually some sort of metric that they can look at and say, okay, we're having this many impacts, or however you would describe it?
Well, everyone does it a bit differently, and I think it's a bit of that question. Is it an art or is it a science? So it's probably some of it. There are scientific ways that you can evaluate the economic or sort of value, the contribution that social activities make. But equally, you can count the number of activities or number of times something is done, the number of people something reaches. It's very context dependent is the sort of the long and short of it. So that's why it is a sort of consultable field, or something that's quite amenable to consulting, because you've got to work through, all of that logic mapping stuff. So what are the activities? What are the outputs? What are the outcomes? What's the impact going to be? And that was a lot of fun doing that for a while. But after a couple of years, I sort of hit a point where I realised that it had failed to become what I wanted it to be. And also the stresses of running that business whilst also working part-time for Taskforce, the not-for-profit, just became a bit too much, too difficult for what they were in terms of reward or future prospects for growth. So I closed that business actually a couple of years ago.
Yeah, okay. And was that around when you started Humans of Purpose as well?
Yeah, so Humans of Purpose and Purposeful started at the same time in about 2017, and then I closed Purposeful last year, in the middle of the year. And that was a hard decision, but it was a decision that helped me to really excel in my not-for-profit role at Taskforce, which is now full-time, and in the executive team there, and really love that work that we do. And, I think sometimes in life you've only got space for a certain number of things to do really well. A lot of people are trying to do 6, 7, 8 things, but, doing them all in a pretty average piecemeal way. And it's a common mistake because I think society tells us that we should just be perfect people and be able to do everything. But my theory is really that we can only ever do a handful of things well. So we've got to be really careful of what are the things once we've got them in our sort of, grips and decided that's in the select few things we'll do.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot, actually. And it's been a lesson for myself recently where I've even been looking at my goals that I have set, and I'm like, okay, I just need to throw half of those goals aside and just, put them on pause for a bit. Otherwise, there's just too many things going on, And those are just goals within the one business of iHealth Saunas, you know, let alone other goals. So I think there's certainly something to be said there to, you know, focus on, you know, just a few things and do them well.
And also for yourself, you know, you might find that there's 20% of the goals that you've selected at iHealth or your life that contribute to 80% of the impact. And that's very common to sort of see that both in people's lives and in businesses, is that it's really just that 20% that you really need to identify and then focus on, and then you'll get a lot more kind of return on that investment.
Yeah, that's a good point. When you've been interviewing people on Humans of Purpose, like you said, they're people who perhaps, you know, aren't in the limelight, or they're currently in the grind, getting shit done. And, you know, in society, we really only celebrate people once they've reached the end of their road, and it misses the 99% of the time that they've absolutely hustled to get there. What are the kind of key elements that you've noticed through these interviews that all these people, all of these humans with purpose, actually hold and work on?
Yeah, so I think people who come on Humans of Purpose are generally quite reflective, and they've spent a lot of time thinking about how they can be better, which I think is interesting. So they're not just self-obsessed. It's very, you know, different to be self-obsessed and to be properly self-reflective. These are self-reflective people. They're people who are committed to getting the best out of themselves, but they're usually doing it for a higher purpose. And I think what really shines through in a lot of the conversations is that they don't see themselves as being extrinsically motivated by things like money and status and some of the things that you'd normally hear about from successful people. They're more thinking about how can we help our social enterprise, our not-for-profit, or our organisation help as many people as possible as it was set up to do under its mission. So it's very clean. It's very altruistic. It sort of feels quite simple. I think one thing I quite like to hear in Humans of Purpose conversations is points of failure. I think that we still have a funny relationship with failure and things not working out, and we sort of need to, you know, peel that layer off a little bit and be a little bit more analytical about failure, because it's just part of everyday life for everyone and everything. So I enjoy conversations where people have had sort of like a failure arc or a realization that they might need to do something radically different. And then, you know, the beauty of hindsight is that might have worked out really well. So there's sort of some things. I think Humans of Purpose generally are people who are interested in the world. So curiosity being sort of a key element. They're often big readers. They're often people who have passions outside of their work, and they're people who are very loving and caring generally too. So obviously everyone's different, but that might just give it sort of a good pattern or range of the types of people that we have on the show.
And do they often, you know, some people would say that you're perhaps born with purpose, or that it's, you know, attached to your soul and you have your soul purpose, or why you're on the planet. Do these Humans of Purpose often, and I talk about these people like this, they're over there, but you're a human of purpose and I am too. Do you find that? Yeah, that's right. Do you find that generally people have some sort of experience that helps them realize it, or it's something that is just developed over time? Yeah,
look, it's a split. Some people just really seem to come out of the womb and know exactly what they want to do and just are gung-ho at it their whole lives. And I mean, I think it's a bit the grass is always greener. So if you're not one of those people, you always would just wish that you were one, because life would be so much simpler. But they've got their challenges as well. But no, I think certainly people generally for a lot of their lives are just trying different things until they find something that really resonates with them and makes them feel better than some of the previous experiences. And certainly for me in my life and my career, I've ended up in the not-for-profit sector where I'm really happy. I really love being here, but, I'm mid-30s now, and it's taken me some time to find that this is more or less the place that I want to be. And I only got here by trying lots of different places like government, quasi-government, non-government organisations, small businesses, entrepreneurship. It's sort of like you've just got to try lots of different things and figure out what is the best match for what makes me tick and sort of unlocks that little thing. Or sometimes it's like even beyond purpose. What job has a package or combination of the things that I like to do the most that make me happy in that moment? is another way to think about it. Some people talk about meaningfulness of work or purpose in work, but sometimes it's really just pragmatically thinking about, what is the calling that I'm doing, and when I'm in that calling or in that profession, does it make me feel better in many ways at a soul, heart, and mind level than maybe the sum of previous experiences in different places?
And what would you say to someone who's too scared to follow their purpose?
Too scared to follow their purpose? Well, I mean, you've got to be true to yourself at the end of the day. And I think there's ways to nibble off different parts of what you think your purpose might be without diving headfirst in. So I think some people mistake the purpose thing for waking up one day and deciding, oh, my purpose is to be a belly dancer, so I'm just going to quit my job in government or as an entrepreneur and go join the belly dancing academy. That's not real calling or purpose or a proper action plan. A proper action plan might be, you take maybe a small class or, a small introductory course to something on the side. You learn a bit about it. You spend some months thinking, what are the potential pathways to this? How could I incorporate this into my life? And even for me, I can say that, one thing I'm very interested in at the moment is mindfulness meditation, but I'm not going to go into a cave in Tibet and just stay there for 5 years. That's not the plan. I'm just going to spend 10 minutes a day slowly integrating that into my life and seeing, will I eventually go on a retreat, which is sort of maybe a goal for the next 6 months.
No, your newfound purpose, Mike.
Exactly.
Is to become a mindfulness teacher.
Can you see me levitating off my seat?
yeah, exactly. The floor just disappeared behind you all of a sudden.
That's right. I just went into this purple haze, much like your sauna.
Yeah, I'm very much in a purple haze right now. Not the kind of purple haze that Jimi Hendrix was singing about, though, I don't think. I agree with what you're saying there. I've always been, and I'm still doing some of this myself, right? As you know, I'm an advocate for fasting, and every time I fast, like every single time I do an extended fast, afterwards, I'm so motivated to share fasting with the world. And, I will start a fasting business sometime in the next year or two, because it's just every time I do it, I'm so drawn to share that with more and more people because I know how powerful it is. But I certainly didn't think that after doing just one fast. And, this feels great. Yeah, I'm going to devote my life to it. It was something that kind of...
Totally. And I think what would make sense to me, it would be like if you started to do more content on fasting, which you might do through the podcast or what other means. You might start a dedicated blog or podcast about it, dip your toes in the water a bit. Just because you love something and you're passionate about it, I think it doesn't necessarily mean you have to dive headfirst into it or start a business. So I think, we're really lucky that the age that we live in, that we've got things like podcasts, YouTube, blogs. You could just, be part of someone else's blog or YouTube series. You could be part of someone else's blog or write for someone else, your guest blog. And I think there's a lot of options to really, express your passion without needing to be in on something.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Oftentimes, I talk to people, friends, family, people I know, and, oftentimes purpose comes up and, there always seems to be some hesitation there because they feel like they have to dedicate their whole life to whatever it is that they think their purpose is, right? They feel like they have to quit their job today and, start earning money from that job tomorrow. And that's all of a sudden what they do. And I think what you just said there is a really good suggestion. Like, just start small. You don't have to rearrange your life.
Really small, and just incrementalism, I think, is at the heart of everything. So what are the 1% that you can add into your day that might be part of that might make a small difference to your overall life and what you want to do? And just constantly evaluate that on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. Has adding those things into your day led to overall improvement in you or the community? And then just use that as your basis for going forward.
And how did your life begin to change once you started following your purpose more?
Yeah, so, engaging with the podcast has just been an incredible journey for me that enabled me to feel as though I am a creative person. So I used to think before I did the podcast that I wasn't particularly creative, and I didn't have a huge amount to offer the world beyond just being like a, hardworking bureaucrat. Podcasts can produce something of value that's artistic. And doing that has just opened up a whole lot of doors. And it's also changed how I think about myself as a person and what gives me satisfaction and nourishment. So, I've always been somebody who has enjoyed, foreign film, culture, food, travel, being sort of a person of the world, more or less. But I think engaging in something that's creative, where you manifest something, is really important in sort of what your life might look like. And doing that has sort of opened me up to doing more public writing, more thought leadership type of work. Not just having a voice on my own podcast, but writing for Pro Bono News, Australia's top not-for-profit journal each month online, and doing that in a way, just sort of creating your own artistic voice in a community helps you be more than just a person who's a worker in an everyday organisation. So I felt very privileged to have had a voice and to connect with incredible people, and also feel like now that I've created something as a creator, I could create a number of different business, created a podcast. I get excited by the idea of making something and putting it into the world.
I think it sounds to me like what you're saying is, there isn't so much resistance in you doing things now because there's that enjoyment there, and you've also got momentum going because of what you've created, and you feel like you can create more and do more of what you enjoy, right?
That's right. And I think we're all going to be conscious that we're writing our own stories as we go through life. So, we're very much going to take our next step, most likely based on our previous steps, our history. So if you want to see yourself as somebody who is creative and able to put things into the world, and as somebody who can manifest things and, not just go along with the way things are, then you need to start creating sooner or later, with whatever level of confidence, and just going on that journey of improvement. Because, at the end of the day, creating art is one of the most beautiful things we can do, whether that's a business or it's a podcast or actually, something artistic itself. It's incredibly important, and that's really what will benefit community a lot more than anything else.
Yeah, I like that. So you mentioned something in there. You were talking about some of your kind of passions outside of all the purpose work that you do, and you mentioned food, and it just got me thinking of all the foodies out there. And I know that you have a few health protocols, and let's get into a bit of that, and maybe we can lift off from what food it is that you are putting in your body.
Yeah, sure. So to start with, I'm not sure whether this is your protocol, but in terms of fasting, I do an intermittent fast where from about 8 p.m. The previous night till about lunchtime, 12 or 12:30, if I can make it that far the next day, I won't be eating. So I try and have a more limited feeding window. In terms of what I eat, since COVID, we've been cooking a lot more. So cook a lot of soups, a lot of meat dishes, and just simple foods that are wholesome and not too carby or caloric. And then, usually have at least one of those meals per day. I still like to reward myself a bit with a bit of takeaway or Uber Eats on the healthier side of the spectrum. Just, let's face it, we all need to do something to make ourselves feel human during this horrible lockdown period. So,
I agree.
So for me, it's I like to reward myself a few times a week with some Uber Eats, and generally the main principle of eating for me is just not to eat between meals. So just 2 meals a day, one at about 12:30, one at about 5:30. It's pretty early, I know, but it's just sort of like my wife's family was early eating family, and for me, it's just when I'm naturally hungry. So eat then and sort of leave a nice gap till bedtime. And I think that's apparently quite good for the system to have that gap before you go to sleep at night too.
Yeah, I mean, digestion takes up so much energy. It also takes energy away from our body to do what it needs to do to sleep, right? And going to bed, within a couple of hours after eating isn't the most ideal thing if you're trying to improve your quality of sleep. And yeah, 2 meals a day. Love that. And nothing in between. It's like just have a good, well-balanced meal so you're not hungry in between, and sip on water and let your gastrointestinal system do what it needs to do. Because
100%. And I think it's also just like the one thing I learned the hard way is just to make sure you can eat a bit more, because you're having 2 meals a day. So when you are eating healthy and you are eating only 2 meals, don't be afraid to sort of like, if you're having chicken balls or something for dinner, to have a second serving of chicken balls, because really like you need to stay full for longer, and it's only protein, so you can kind of stack up on a bit.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's just, I think especially with food, well, with health in general, because there's so much information out there that when we start to learn, we turn off our intuition. We turn off what we kind of feel and know. It's like, oh, no, I need to like stop eating now, or not eat this or not do that because I heard this one scientific article that said that, whatever this thing is good or bad or otherwise. And we're forgetting sometimes to just feel like, okay, actually, no, I'm still a bit hungry. Maybe I'll just eat a little bit more, and that's okay, So, yeah, valid points there. And then what other things have you got going on in your kind of health and wellness routines?
So I take health and wellbeing very seriously, because I've actually had chronic depression since I was quite young. So it's very important for me to stay on top of my wellness, make sure I'm sleeping well, making sure I'm exercising, making sure I'm eating well, and just making sure my habits are generally good. So that's the first thing to say, is that probably I've taken a bit more abnormally high care of myself, and knowing what's good for you is really important for everyone, but particularly if you've faced mental health challenges before, it becomes very important. So try and exercise every day. At the moment, since I've had the back surgery, it's been a bit limited. So I get around for a little jog if I can, but it's sort of hard, and I've got to kind of limit that. The sauna has been immensely helpful. I actually discovered saunas, and this isn't a pure eye health shout out, but a few months ago, my gym near work had a sauna, and I started to, after my runs, go and have a sauna. And I noticed for myself that my mood and my general feeling just really shifted after that sauna, and I'd feel more relaxed, more calm, more kind of connected and clean. So I decided earlier in the year to get a sauna, and since having one just before COVID got it installed, have been having a sauna every single day after my run or my little walk. And that's been tremendous. Trying to get sleep is really important. So I'm usually in bed by about 8:30 at the latest. I'm a really, like to get into bed and have a long wind down period. So I stopped doing work and emails and everything at about 5, and just really concentrate on watching good quality TV, spending time with my partner, reading, seeing, if I can see people, seeing people, and just doing stuff that helps me ease into a nice sleep. And then sort of beyond that, I do sort of branch a bit into the longevity kind of space as well. So I'm a bit interested in the experimental ways that we can optimize our current health, and also potentially extend it longer into the future. So I do play around with a few of the David Sinclair protocols around longevity, which sort of include resveratrol, NMN, and metformin, which you can sort of look up via Lifespan, which is some of his blog. And I do that stuff just because I think I've started to care more and more about, feeling as good as I can at the age that I am, and also maintaining that kind of energy and longevity for as long as possible. So, so that would be sort of maybe the edgier stuff. But I think the stuff that is most important is the exercise, the sauna, the sleep, and lastly is meditation. So recently started doing 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation a day, just to sort of break up the end of the workday with the sort of evening. And for me, I've had friends that have been telling me to do that for years, and I've just sort of committed recently during COVID as a sort of silver lining practice. and I've really taken to that so well and love it. So I make sure I do that every day, and leaves me calmer and happier, and just feeling a bit more peaceful.
What pushed you to start to do the 10-minute meditation a day? Was it purely just COVID and wanting to find some sort of peace within the chaos?
Yeah, so I think COVID is a really important time to try and make whatever internal and life improvements you can in spite of the difficulties going on sort of outside us. And, the Stoics actually say that there's only two things you can really control. You can control what you think about and what you do. So we really should try and take those sort of recommendations to heart in how we think about thriving in difficult times. And for me, that's meant sort of thinking, well, during this time, what can I achieve? I've been able to achieve pretty good weight loss. I've achieved a recovery from my back issues. I've been able to read some really high quality books. I've been able to add in a meditation practice. So meditation was just one of those things that was sort of a low hanging fruit that's there. And basically, with the amount of apps and people talking about it constantly around you, you have to basically be living under a rock not to be pulled in by one of them at some point. So I just answered the call really and just downloaded one of the apps and gave it a go. And, just for no other reason than it's something that I could add into my life, in an otherwise pretty boring time.
Yeah, absolutely. What app do you use?
So it's called Insight Meditation Timer. And it's got some great free courses on it. It was recommended by my buddy who I did the Inca Trail with. And it's just basic mindfulness meditation. And, there's so many apps out there now and different types of practices. I'm looking forward to trying a bit more of them. But just getting through this 7 days and seeing what comes next is quite exciting and different.
That's great. I haven't come across that one. I'll have to check that out. When you had your back surgery, what did you end up getting done there to sort that out?
So I had a microdiscectomy, which is where they basically cut a little an incision in your lower disc and carve part of it out that was just hanging out. So it was a badly prolapsed disc, and I had chronic pain for a few months, and I was still stupidly just thought it would go away and was doing things like rock climbing and bouldering and running and sort of all the stuff that I enjoy doing. And then one day I just couldn't really bend down and just realised that things were getting quite bad. And it was just before we went into lockdown. So I managed to get into the hospital and get it operated on. And it laid me out flat for a couple of, probably a week or two. It was quite challenging. But then, it sort of started to get better. And I'm very lucky now that I can function pretty well. And, things will be fine into the future.
What protocol did you, or if any protocols did you kind of utilize coming out of surgery on top of what you were advised?
So coming out of surgery for this kind of condition, you're supposed to just walk a lot. So I walked heaps, which is really weird advice for a condition like this because you think it's like just lie down and do nothing. But no, actually you're supposed to walk a lot. So I made sure I was hitting about 15 or 20,000 steps a day. You'll find this quite funny, but when I went into hospital, I was probably a little bit overweight. I was told that, I was probably carrying a few extra kilos. But when they do the, because you go under general and they put a throat tube in an intubator, sometimes it carves the back of your throat and it makes a bit of a dent and cuts you. So I had a pretty severe cut from the tube going in, which meant that I couldn't really eat much. So it was kind of, it was terrible. But at the same time, I did manage to drop a few kilos immediately just because I was in so much pain eating. So I sort of recovering from the back and recovering from the throat at the same time. And, no one asked me, how's your throat going? But plenty of people asked, how's the back? And eventually, look, it was just fine. It really is in terms of like procedures or issues that you could have. It's like a first world problem. The problem with mine was that the disc wouldn't have gone back in naturally had I waited. It had to be cut because it was just all over. It was a really bad prolapse.
Yeah. Okay. Mind you, probably not eating as much over that time probably helped with the recovery.
I tell you, it adds a whole new element to the idea of mindful eating. Yeah.
And when did you start to get into David Sinclair?
So I love keeping on top of what the latest health trends that I call pre-evidence or pre-science. So what are people who are professors and leading edge kind of practitioners doing globally in their own protocols and in their experiments that are not quite science yet and don't have a sound evidence base but are showing really good promise? And I like to follow that kind of thing. So, I'd heard David Sinclair on Joe Rogan and then started to hear him on a few other platforms. And, I think his work is pretty incredible. And I think, some of the stuff he recommends is not rocket science. So diabetics take metformin, and plenty of people take metformin to control insulin blood sugar spikes. And that's pretty standard for a lot of people. And resveratrol is found in very small trace amounts in red wine. that's why people say, you know, red wine is very good for you. But the truth is you have to drink thousands of bottles of red wine to get a sufficient daily dose of resveratrol to make much of a health difference. So it's really just capturing that, just giving you more of that in a capsule to give you that kind of health benefit. So, yeah, it's good. So people like David Sinclair, Rhonda Patrick's another one who's doing pretty incredible work. And, you know, a lot of these people are leading the charge in terms of other simple things as well, like prevention and just general health, like around vitamin D and COVID, for example. So it's just good to sort of stay on top of what they're saying.
Yeah, definitely. I love it. Just touching on that resveratrol thing. Classic human beings just like clutching onto something. It's just like, no, but like I'm sure it's good for me. It's got resveratrol.
Yeah, exactly.
My grandparents are from a different era. And when I was telling them that I was fasting for 30 days on water at the start of the year and explaining to them why I wanted to do that, ever since then, my nonno always asks me, he says, like, so how old do you want to live to? Like, what age do you want to get to, Alex? Do you want to live to 120? He's always like, because all of your friends will be dead. Who are you going to talk to? And I find that kind of comical, you know, in a sense. But at the same time, you know, we look after our bodies now, and it may not mean that we're going to live to 120, but it might mean that when we're in our 80s, we're still able to function physically.
That's right.
And now, and yeah, I think you kind of get where I'm going with that. Right?
No, you're 100% right. And I just wanted to add to that because a lot of these proponents of longevity talk about wanting to live to 150. I have no ambition to live to 150. I mean, I think I'd be happy to tap out at maybe the standard age of 85 or, you know, around then. But what I am trying to do is I want to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible. So what I'm doing now is so that when I'm 60 or 65 or 70 or 75, that I still feel like I'm 50, hopefully. Or, you know, just to try and tip the scales a bit and try and optimize.
Yeah, absolutely. It's increasing that health span, right?
That's right. Health span is a really good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. There's a big difference between health span and lifespan. You know, chatting with my dad, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a couple of years ago, and which, by the way, if anyone wants motivation to look after themselves, spend a week with someone with Alzheimer's and you'll be pretty motivated, I promise. And, you know, it's some of the things that he says, you know, like he's turning 70 and in his mind, like, you know, he hates even hearing the number 70 because to him it's like life's over when you're at that age. And it's just a real, like, every time I hear him sort of make those comments, I'm just like, man, like 70 is not the end of life. It doesn't need to be, you know, or even people in their 60s saying similar things like, oh, well, I can't do that now. Like I'm 65. It's like, but what do you mean? Like you're 65.
And I think it also changes with the generation. So I think like 70 now is so different to 70 20 years ago, or like it's just a total different 70. So my dad's 71. He's just rocking out. He's just killing it. You know, he's still working full time. He's busy he's got research underway. He's very hard to get a hold of. He's doing just about everything. And, you know, he's just taken up Pilates and now does that 3 times a week and, you know, still skiing once a year where he can. And, you know, he hasn't changed since he was in his 50s. So I just try and think if that's the benchmark, then, you know, what can I do now to sort of be better than that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Good on your dad for doing that. You know, it just goes to show that at that age, you can still achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. Maybe not like winning the Olympics in like 100-meter freestyle.
I wouldn't like that. That'd just be humiliating.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? Michael Phelps, I think he's into like biohacking. So maybe in like 20 years, he'll go back to the Olympics, win some gold medals or something.
That'd be cool.
And so jumping back to Humans of Purpose again, do you find that they oftentimes have a focus on their health?
Yes, I think there's a focus on health, but I think there's also just an inherent acknowledgement that they're extremely successful, extremely busy people, often with families too. So, it's sort of the people that I'm talking to a lot of the time might have a few kids, they might be CEOs, they might have this and that going on. So they're doing what they can, but I think the reason I like having conversations like this is because maybe we're a bit not at that stage yet. We can be a bit more intentional about building those practices before we get to that stage, where a lot of these people haven't probably had the time or the interest to do the pre-work in getting those kind of habits and routines bedded down before they have the families or the really significant career lives. So, if you're listening to this and you are in your 20s or your early 30s, you're at a really advantageous stage of life where you can build in great habits and routines into your life before things get too busy and out of control, and just set yourself up for a really good quality of life, not just now, but way into the future. So doing whatever you can, trying those new things, trying to always think about what are other people doing that you could learn from, what are the experts doing that you could integrate, and keeping a really open mind as well, and just practicing not being judgmental of what other people are doing too.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that better. Early 20s, sort some of this stuff out now, because otherwise it's going to get hard afterwards.
Yeah, but when I was speaking to you the other week on my podcast, Humans of Purpose, I think you're tremendously advanced in what you're doing, because I think about what I was doing when I was, a bit young your age, and I just had no bloody idea. So we all come to it, I think, at different points, but the sooner you can start to get really healthy in your life, and not just exercise, but the eating, whether it's fasting, saunas, optimizing, finding how you can optimize however you can as early as you can is sort of critical, and just starting that journey. And you find that it is a really fun journey to be on. Once you've got, and I'm sure you enjoy it too, but I think about my day every day, and I get excited every day for the sauna and the run. I get excited for the, for the meditation and sort of transitioning to a different stage of the day, going for a walk and taking my dog to the park. So it's all stuff that, is really positive, but just understanding the benefit and the importance that it has to your lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even like, you don't have to make health your life, right? But it's just having that understanding that if you focus on your health enough to build in good routines that are going to see you throughout your life, it's just going to allow you to do more of what you want to do, whether that's being a car journalist, or whether it's being a pilot or a writer or a social media influencer, whatever it is you do, right? If you're in a state of good health, you're going to be able to create more. You're not going to be hindered as much by a stuffed back or your joints that are failing on you in 5 or 10 years. You're going to have more energy, and all of that stuff comes out of just looking after yourself in the first place.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'll add to that is to make sure you're on the lookout all the time to try new things and add new things to what you enjoy doing in your kind of array of fun activities. Like for me this year, adding in bouldering sort of to late last year, early this year has been just like a game changer. Like if you had asked me a year ago what would my favorite thing be to do, it would certainly not be bouldering. It'd probably just be, sitting in the sun reading a book or something like that. But now any opportunity I get, backpending, I'll go bouldering in a heartbeat. And that's sort of become one of my favorite things to do, which is actually very meditative to me and very grounding. Also running in nature, trying to run down trails and that kind of stuff has become, a real point of interest, and meditation too. And they're all things that were not in my life a year ago. And just because, being open to different experiences, they've all added so much to my life that I'm really grateful for those opportunities.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Whereabouts in Melbourne do you boulder?
So there's the Blockhouse in Port Melbourne, which is great. And Louise and I do it together, my wife. But we went originally to Northcote and we're in Abbotsford a bit, but we live in Elsternwick, so it wasn't that convenient. And then went out to Blockhouse in Port Melbourne and really enjoyed that setup there. So fingers crossed they open up in a few weeks and allow some bookings again.
Yeah, man. I'm hanging out for that. We'll have to go.
Do you go too?
Sometime, actually. Yeah. God, I can't even remember. What's the main place just north of the city?
The north side?
Yeah. I can't even remember it now. Anyway, it'll come to me at some stage.
Yeah, we'll have to go sometime.
Yeah. It's really good. I used to do a fair bit of rock climbing, and then started doing that, and it's kind of more accessible in a way. I don't know, and you can just kind of think and have a bit more fun, I found, instead of so you know when you're rock climbing, sometimes you climb 5 walls and then you're done.
Yeah, and also like being roped into everything is also not that fun all the time. It's a bit restrictive.
Yeah, that's right. No, I really enjoy bouldering. Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you for sharing a bit about what you're doing, and also your own personal health and wellness practices. Really, really insightful stuff. If people want to find out more about what it is you do or find your podcast, where can they find you?
So you can just look for Humans of Purpose on any podcast player. Just search for it. Otherwise, humansofpurpose.com is the website. You can feel free to drop me a note or an email at mike@humansofpurpose.com. And happy listening.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, man. Talk soon.
Peace. Pleasure. Thanks, mate.